All right, hello everybody. It is 6 o'clock, time to get going with our Wednesday study. Glad you're here. Several already logged in and more to come over the next few minutes. So we'll handle our announcements first. First of all, rainy Wednesday night again. So if you hear a lot of noise, it sounds like static right outside me. That's probably because in this particular spot you can hear the rain hitting the overhang right outside the wall. Hopefully that won't bleed through over onto the sound. Current state of things. Right now, we are meeting in person on Sunday mornings at Duncan and still in sort of a holding mode for Sunny Level. Situations are different with the congregations, different demographic makeup, different ages, different places in life, and so we got different situations there, and Sunny Level is kind of in a wait and see right now. Duncan is meeting in person on Sunday for the time being, and I'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. But we are meeting with certain restrictions in place. We have our hygiene protocols, disinfecting the building. We're using every other pew, skipping pews, alternating ends on the pews where we enter and exit, where we sit, and then only family members or family groups, we call them household groups, are going to sit together, and everybody, including me, wears a mask the whole time you're in the building. So those are the protocols we have in place right now as we meet. And I said that is for the time being. So let me tell you why I'm adding that little comma for the time being. We are keeping a close eye on the Alabama Department of Health right now. In particular, I think this is a relatively new tool that, or at least we found it pretty recently, to help give sort of a big picture on all the data that's coming in about COVID-19. It's not just cases. It's not just numbers of people with it or numbers of people who die from it, which just by itself, either one of those is not really a good measure to try to make these kind of decisions that we're making with. So this particular site with the data that we're looking at now compiles a rating based on things like numbers of cases, numbers of deaths, numbers of tests being given, percentage of positives, how many per day through the course of a couple of weeks, and then they compile that data and some other things that I'm not really up on because I'm just not a numbers statistics kind of person, but they compile all these numbers and statistics over the course of 2 weeks and take a rolling average over 2 weeks, and then they assign a relative risk rating. Okay, that risk rating goes from green, which is low risk, to yellow, which is moderate risk, to orange, which is high risk, to red, which is very high risk. Okay, now the data on this is released every Friday afternoon, late in the afternoon, usually around 4 o'clock. That's when they update all the color coding and the risk parameters that we're looking at. Last Friday, what happened was Tallapoosa County jumped from yellow, a moderate risk, up to red, a very high risk. Since it was a one-time occurrence, we kind of made the call on the fly to just go ahead and meet this past Sunday and just let everybody know, hey, it's gone to red, but we're going to go ahead and meet this time. Now, what the reason for all this explanation is this coming Friday, 2 days from now, when the new information comes out, we'll take a look at that. If it remains red, if the risk level remains at red for Tallapoosa County, then we will call off in-person worship and drop back to online worship only. That's the adjustment that we'll make. If it remains red in a very high risk, we will need to go to online worship only. That's just a need we feel like we need to, or move we feel like we need to make to maximize safety for everybody. Because all along, what we've tried to do is find that delicate balance between, yes, we want to get back together, yes, we want to be in the same room, yes, we want to have worship together, but we also want to be as safe as possible doing it. And we recognize that the risk is never zero. In an environment like we're living in these days, the risk is never zero, and yet we try to get it as low as we can. That's why we have all those other protocols I was talking about earlier in place. But just another aspect of that is paying attention to these numbers and the risk level. And if it stays at a very high risk, then we will go to an online worship only again. Those remain. Our online options will remain, whether we're meeting in person or not. Those online options will remain on Facebook Live on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock and here on Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock, Facebook Live. I will tell you, we try to get everything over to our YouTube page, the Duncan YouTube page. After it's aired on Facebook Live, we try to get it over to YouTube. Just for those folks who are not on Facebook, perhaps that maybe they could see it on YouTube. I've had a little bit of a problem with YouTube the last 2 going on 3 weeks. Uploading has been a serious problem, and we haven't been able to transfer stuff like we wanted to do. So a lot of it is still just archived on the Facebook page. Anything older than late June is on the YouTube page. The newer stuff, we're trying to figure out ways around it, trying to find tech answers to this, but we're having kind of a hard time with uploads, getting the uploads from our saved videos onto the YouTube page. If anybody has any insight about that, I'd be glad to hear your troubleshooting solutions on that. So drop a message into this if you want, or get me to call you, or have me call you, or whatever. I have Googled my fingers till they blister, trying to figure out answers on this. But suffice to say, we are having kind of a hard time getting things copied over to YouTube, and we're on it, trying to do the best we can. But just realize that there is a little bit of a log jam there. We're kind of behind there because of the upload problem. It's not just because we haven't copied them over. It's because for some reason YouTube won't let them copy over right now. So if anybody's got any insight on that, any magic you want to lay on me for YouTube, I would gladly welcome that. Okay, so just be on the lookout Friday afternoon. My Friday Thoughts email will go out sometime after we get that data from the Department of Health. Okay, so sometime after 4. I don't know exactly when it'll be, but late afternoon. I'm going to hold my Friday Thoughts email until we get that information and we're able to decide, does this merit going to online worship only, or are we going to continue with in person? So watch your email. If you're on that email list, watch your email Friday night. There you'll have a word. Are we a go or not for Sunday morning? If you're not on that email list, or if you know somebody who's not on that email list and has email, they need to be. It's a valuable channel of information. I send out a couple of emails a week, usually with scripture and devotional thoughts in them, but it's also some information about things like this when things happen. And we also have that as the prayer chain. That's how that email list developed, is as a prayer chain. So if you're not a part of it, or if you know somebody who needs to be a part of that email list, please let me know, and we'll get you signed up for that. So watch your email Friday evening, and anybody who is not on the email list, we will make every effort to try to make phone calls. But watch your email and pass the word. And if we have to suspend on Sunday, we need to get that word out as quickly as possible. So be on the lookout for that. And in the meantime, just as you have been throughout these last trouble months, just continue to be the church. Continue to reach out. Continue to make some phone calls. Check in on folks. That kind of thing that we've been doing for these last few months, and we maintain those connections and those ties together as the church, and we continue to be the church, helping and being there and serving for each other and with each other. And that's what the church is. It's not this building that's around me. It's you doing the things that you do. Okay, so let's continue to do that and continue to be prayerful for those that are in particular need and just for general needs. Not only people who are sick, but also just for the general state of things in our congregation, in our community, in our country, in our world. Just being mindful of those things. So thinking about those, let's have a quick word of prayer. We'll do that, and then we'll get to tonight's chapter on our study. Okay? Gracious God, we are thankful for a day in which you have allowed us to be here, to move around, to interact with others, and to be in relationship with you. We ask that in this pause point of the middle of the week, that we would take in what your Spirit wants to tell us tonight. Whatever it is that we need to take forward with us, let us receive that tonight and take it and be able to step out boldly with it. Help those who are hurting right now. There are so many that may be across the country, another part of the world, maybe in our own house. But we call them to mind. We think of them, we love them, and we lift them up to you right now. For those that suffer that we may not even know, but are suffering nonetheless, we ask for your healing and your help, and that you would make your presence known to them. We know that you're with them. You walk with us through trouble. We pray that you'd make your presence known, and help that presence be known through us wherever we can, wherever we can step in and lift someone up and speak to someone or help someone in some way. Help us to be the ones who do that, to be the light that you call us to be, the reflection of your light that you call us to be. Tonight, help us to dive into this list of commandments that call for so much more than just avoiding behavior. Help us to see the new dimensions in commandments tonight and to be able to take that with us as we go. We pray all these things in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, so this is our book that I'm kind of starting the conversation with. It's by J. Ellsworth Kalas, The 10 Commandments from the Backside. That's what we've been looking at, the 10 Commandments from the Backside. And as the title indicates, it's sort of a rephrasing, a relook, a fresh perspective maybe on the 10 Commandments that are so very familiar to us. And so sometimes we need to see them in a new way to maybe take them forward in a better way and a more effective, internalized kind of way. As I mentioned in prayer just then, the idea of the commandments are more than just avoiding certain behaviors. It's more than a thou shalt not list, really, which is evidenced in the way that Kalas rephrases and tries to help us with these commandments. Tonight we're on number 9. It comes from Exodus 20, chapter 20, verse 16. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And the way that Kalas rephrases that is to say, you shall bless and be blessed by the truth. All right? I like that. You shall bless and be blessed by the truth. All right, so one of the greatest things about humanity, we talked Sunday morning a good bit about how humans, even though we share maybe up to 99% and some change DNA with certain other members of the animal kingdom, humans are distinct. Humans are different. There is a distinction there, and humans are, as we talked about Sunday morning, created in the image of God. The only species that is ever described in that way is human beings. And one of the gifts that we have is our power of thought, our great big brains that we have. And coming from that great big brain is the power to communicate. Now, again, other animals communicate in certain ways, often in just body language or certain behaviors or whatever. But we are the only ones that have a complex means of verbally communicating with each other. And that's a product of our big brain, all right? What the mind brings out for us, what we learn, what we think, what we feel, all those things are pretty much useless unless they are communicated in some way. You know, and often that is verbally, whether it's a very personal sort of thing or it's a more formal sort of communication. Communication is the way that we convey what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we've found, what we've learned, all these things. And our communication can either be really good and really productive and really uplifting, or it can be used for ill as well. I mean, like anything else that we can do, our communication can be used for ill just as much as it can be used for good. We have this little phrase in common language, you know, that when things go wrong, you know, the wheels comes off of a project, or, you know, something just goes terribly awry, we often talk about a breakdown in communication. And that's often the case, you know, that somebody didn't tell somebody or didn't tell them effectively, or it wasn't heard, you know, whatever, a breakdown of communication. And so communication is a very, very important thing. And the ninth commandment protects the integrity and the power of our communication, because it can be warped, it can be distorted. Communication can be used, as I said, for terrible things. You know, everybody pretty much gets the ability to do that. We don't have to pass any sort of test to voice our opinions. If you've been on social media, you know that very well, don't you? Yeah, we're acquainted with that every day. You know, you don't have to prove you know anything to share your opinion, really. So, you know, we can communicate things, but we have to be careful about the way we communicate them. The ninth commandment would say, you know, saying that we shouldn't bear false witness against our neighbor. We kind of think in terms of court situation sometimes, you know, bearing false witness, it carries kind of that weight. You know, we think about a court type testimony sort of thing, you know, where big money or life and death kind of hang in the balance, stuff like that. But Jewish people understood this as the whole of human relationships. You know, bearing false witness expands into all of relationships, everything, and every type of slander or defamation or misrepresentation or anything like that would fall into this area of bearing false witness. It applied to groups and to races and families and faith just as much as it does to individuals. The contemporary English version of the Bible, Callis points out that it has a really good, it really simplifies this command, but it's very, very pointed and very good in its translation. It says, "You shall not tell lies about others," and that kind of takes it out of that idea of, oh, I'm in a court and I got to tell the truth, you know, and takes it into a more personal thing, not telling lies about others. Because everywhere we go, reputations are on trial, really, when you think about it. Decisions are made all the time, you know, in business meetings and job interviews and scholarship reviews and luncheons and telephone gossip and parties and all this stuff, you know. People's reputations are on the line a lot of times in a lot of different situations. And the truth is important in the court, because you're speaking on oath and under oath and all that. But it's important in everyday personal life too. Social occasions, it's important. Even though there may not be some oath involved, it's still important. And a lot of times those more casual situations kind of promote or make it easy for us to play kind of loose with how we judge our own speech. We tend to get a little loose with it sometimes. In a court, you'll be more aware of that oath you took. But if you're hanging out at a party or something, you're less likely to be aware of that, and you're more likely to be a little loose about what we say. And in those situations, once it's said, you can't really get it back. I've already talked about squeezing toothpaste out of the tube. Try to put that back in there. It doesn't work. You can't do that. But the way that we protect somebody's reputation, somebody's personal security, whatever, is in observing this ninth commandment. When we talk about others, to be able to talk about them in a truthful way. And it may be that this one is one of the more stepped on sort of commandments. False witness, slander, defaming, whatever. And a lot of times it's because it can be used as a weapon. And it's a weapon that, like I said, anybody can voice their opinion, so it's immediately available to be able to say something about somebody if you want to weaponize what you're saying. James talks about the tongue being this terribly destructive weapon, and not only him, it's throughout scriptures, but we can use that to very detrimental effect. And most of us never think about coming up and punching somebody in the face, but to say something about them or to repeat an unverified rumor or something like that, okay, well, we just might do that, Now, I can say that I have not always pressed somebody if somebody told me something. I've not always pressed them to see, well, what's your sources on that? Do you have confirmation on that? And with a conscience, with a conscience about telling the truth or trying to receive the truth. You might, when you pass it on, you might say, well, this may or may not be true, but ... And in that way, there's a door open to possibly cause harm there. False witness, it takes a lot of different forms. It can come out in a lot of different ways. Different Hebrew words, this is interesting, different Hebrew words described different sort of different positions on this. If you look at Exodus and then look at Deuteronomy, the list of the Ten Commandments in Exodus and Deuteronomy, there's two different lists. Exodus uses a word that means lying or untrue. Deuteronomy uses a word that means insincere or empty or frivolous. I just think that's interesting that there are two different words chosen to describe this idea of bearing false witness. And I think it's significant because sometimes, false witness is not just a outright lie. Sometimes it may just be kind of flippant, off the cuff sort of talk. Maybe we're not sure of the facts. We don't mean any real malice. Don't mean anything bad by it. But being flippant or being really off the cuff or whatever, sometimes it can do great harm, whether we meant it or not. You may not have done a libelous sort of thing, to speak of somebody in a liable sort of way. But it can come out in just a tossed out term. Now, just a term like a label, say. And we do this. Well, we hear this a lot, and maybe we do it. You know, I'd have to I have to be careful and try to, you know, gauge, you know, how much do I do this too, you know, and you might want to ask yourself, you know, how many times do we put a label on somebody? You know, we call somebody, I don't know, a radical or a fundamentalist or a right winger or a liberal or, you know, whatever, and we kind of attach those terms. And when we attach a label to somebody, well, then they may have been damaged by that. I mean, it may or may not be accurate as far as, you know, how we perceive that label to be. But that person may have been harmed by it because somebody else may or may not even listen to that person. Or they may discount what that person says from here on out just because they had that label put on them. So we want to be careful about that. You know, our and again, back to social media, it does this a lot. The idea of making what's called a hot take on social media channels, you know, just that idea of, I have heard this thing, now I'm going to react to it, you know, without any research or another filter or anything. I'm just going to react with my gut sort of reaction. It's called a hot take, and things like that. Those snap decisions, those hot takes, things like that. Can turn things into little sound bites and can label people and can throw judgment on people. And sometimes that's not deserved. That's not going to be something that's deserved. It's going to be something that's harmful for them. So there could be no false witness if there weren't any listeners, right? So here's another aspect of bearing false witness, and maybe we've thought about this, maybe not. There's got to be listeners for false witness to be borne, right? Jewish law, back to Jewish law, condemned the person who gave false evidence and the person who knew that it was false and didn't speak up about it. If somebody had evidence or knew that what a person was saying was untrue and they kept it to themselves, under Jewish law, they could be held liable for that. So if we sit in silence and listen and hear a repetition of something that needs to be questioned or we know is untrue, then we've kind of become a party to that, haven't we? And I think all of us have probably been guilty of that at some time or another. As careful as we may be, I think all of us are probably guilty of listening and not speaking up sometimes. And then a close connected thing to that, to silence, on the kind of I don't know, more sneaky side maybe, is to ask questions in a way that is leading toward false witness. You know, just asking questions. You know, okay, that person is, you know, they're a kind and loving human being, somebody says. And then the other person says, well, that could be, but you'd only know if you lived with them, right? Now, all they've done is ask a question. But in asking that question, it's thrown some doubt on that person's character, right? If you think about that first story with people in the garden in Genesis, the serpent didn't throw out an outright lie to start with. Serpent played the first card of just asking questions. Did God really tell you that? Really? Is that what God told you? You know, just to kind of throw the whole thing into question. And so that can be a problem too. And slander is a problem when we set out to, obviously, to hurt or destroy another person. Sometimes it's a matter of of deliberately doing that. Sometimes it's just a matter of kind of passively doing that, or maybe around the world doing that. But when we do it, however we go about doing it, a lot of times it's about revenge. We intend to, we want to pay somebody back. It's jealousy a lot of times. And here's another insight that Cowles lends to this, the idea that tearing somebody down is often an act of jealousy. We want to cut them down to size, right? And it's kind of ironic to think about this, because when we do that, if we do that, it's sort of an admission that that person is bigger, or at least perceived to be bigger than we ourselves are. If we want to take somebody down, then we kind of perceive them to be bigger than we are somehow. Sometimes we bear false witness against somebody else just because we're unhappy with ourselves. There's something inside that we're unhappy, we're unfulfilled, we're lacking, we're we feel like we're missing something. And so we don't want anybody else to get too high on a pedestal, because we don't feel like we could ever get on a pedestal either. So we have to pull them down. But then we can ask, might ask a question of is there really any harm done? Is there really any harm done when a untruth is told about somebody? There's an old story that Cowles recounts in his story about a Quaker trying to train his dog, and he tried and he tried and he tried and he couldn't do it. And the story goes that the man said to the dog, "Hey, I'm a gentle person, so I'm not going to beat you, but I'll give you a bad name." So he turned the dog out in the street, called him a mad dog, told everybody else it was a mad dog, and pretty soon somebody killed the dog, right? So that's a horrible sort of example, but it is an example that would make us think, real world sort of examples. We've all heard stories about people who have been, children in particular, or teenagers in particular, who have been bullied to the point that they harm themselves or harm somebody else. And so words do matter. As much as we might say, sticks and stones and all that, words really do matter, and words can really cause harm. Slander is one of the most tragic things, one of the most tragic practices in humanity, because it can reach so far. It can destroy trust, and when we think about it, all our relationships depend on trust. And if we tear somebody down, we have in some way destroyed their trust. We ruin ourselves in a social sort of way, just as much as a personal sort of way, because it takes a whole lot of personals and they add up to the social sort of thing. It can get out of hand. Disinformation is a horrible problem in our day. Disinformation is everywhere. Tons of just junk, just garbage that is thrown out, and sometimes intentionally so, to muddy the waters to the point that we don't care, or we're fatigued to the point that we won't seek out the truth. So sometimes that's done intentionally, and it can have horrible results between nations, between spouses, between family members, neighbors, all that. If a person has, if three people are sitting together and one of them leaves and the other person says something to you that's bad about the person that just left, don't you worry about the way they talk about you when you're gone. See, these things kind of spread out, don't they? Right? They have a sort of a blooming effect, blossoming sort of effect. So we need to be able to count on each other. And when we tear somebody down, it diminishes the ability to depend on each other. So the ninth commandment, like the others that we've talked about, it's not just a thou shalt not. It's not a restriction on life. It gives us a foundation, to keep from destroying our relationships and other people, and then our family groups and our societies and our countries and our relations between countries. You see, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But it starts with that idea in our private lives of being very careful about the way that we speak of other people. And going back to that communication, the gift of our big brain again. That gift of being able to communicate is a powerful gift, and it should be treated as something powerful. You get in a car, you got to treat it with some respect, because after all, it is a hurtling piece of metal at high speeds, right? So you have to treat it with some respect, and our communication is much the same. I think it's a great gift, a wonderful tool, and we have to treat it with some respect, and it brings responsibility to our relationships. And then when we're carrying out that responsibility, then we find in each other people that we can count on. So we hear the truth, and we're blessed by it. To go back to Callus, and you shall bless and be blessed by the truth. We hear the truth, we're blessed by that, because we know that we can invest in that as well. We can invest our trust in that. And then when we speak the truth, we are blessed because we know that we have the joy of purity in our hearts, purity in our communications, and purity in our respect for our relationships at whatever level. So that's our ninth commandment for tonight. Next week, we'll talk about coveting. That's a big one that kind of drives society, doesn't it? We'll talk about that one next week. Hope you have found something in tonight to kind of chew on, take with you, hopefully into the rest of the week. I have, and I always do in studying for these things. It's wonderful things to be able to pick up and, like I said, kind of chew on and then take it with you as you go. And I hope you found the same thing. Hope you have a great night and great rest of the week. Again, be sure and watch your email very closely on Friday night. That will be word on whether or not we are continuing with in-person worship Sunday morning.